At 38 years old, Patrick Franklin made exactly $74,210 a year. As a train conductor for the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, his life was measured in timetables and the rhythmic clatter of steel wheels on track. He lived in a modest two-bedroom house in Roslindale, a neighborhood in Boston that felt a world away from the city's glittering skyline. The house, with its $2,800 monthly mortgage, was his anchor. His salary covered it just barely, along with the bills and the carefully budgeted groceries. His was a life of quiet consistency, a world built on the solid bedrock of showing up on time and doing the work. On Thursday, October 12th at 4:07 p.m., that world was served to him in a 9x12 manila envelope. He had just walked in the door, the scent of impending rain heavy in the air. He'd loosened the knot on his uniform tie and placed his worn leather work bag, a $75 gift from his union local 5 years ago, on the small entryway table. That's when the doorbell rang. Not the cheerful chime of a neighbor or a delivery, but a sharp, insistent buzz. Through the frosted glass panel, he saw the silhouette of a man in a nondescript jacket. Patrick opened the door. The man was pale and looked bored. "Patrick Franklin?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes," Patrick said. The man didn't offer a greeting. He simply pushed the thick envelope into Patrick's hand. "You've been served," he mumbled, already turning to walk down the cracked concrete steps of the porch. He climbed into a dented 2014 Hyundai Elantra and drove away without a backward glance. Patrick stood in the doorway, the envelope feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. He closed the door, the click of the latch echoing in the sudden silence of the house. He walked into the kitchen, the linoleum cool beneath his work shoes. He laid the envelope on the simple oak table he'd refinished himself 2 summers ago. For a long moment, he just stared at the typed label, Honorable Suffolk Probate and Family Court. His heart wasn't racing. It was doing something far worse. It felt as if it had been plunged into a bucket of ice water, each beat a slow, painful thud against his ribs. With methodical slowness, he slid his finger under the flap and tore it open. He pulled out the sheaf of papers. The top page read in stark, bold letters, "Complaint for divorce. Plaintiff, Tiffany Sterling Franklin. Defendant, Patrick Franklin." He sank into one of the wooden chairs, the papers trembling slightly in his grip. He had no idea this was coming. Or rather, he had known a storm was gathering for years. But he never imagined it would break like this, with the cold, impersonal formality of the law delivered by a stranger on a gray Thursday afternoon. This was the devastating situation, the demolition of a life, delivered for a filing fee of a few $100s. And as he read the first few lines, he understood that the life he thought he was building, a life of simple, hard-earned stability, had been a facade all along. This document was the reality. We want to hear from you. Have you ever been completely blindsided by someone you trusted? Share your story in the comments below and let's support each other. The facade had been beautiful, at least in the beginning. He met Tiffany at a fundraiser for a local arts program. He was there with a friend from work. She was there with colleagues from the high-powered public relations firm in Back Bay where she was a rising star. Patrick, a black man with a quiet confidence and a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, was immediately drawn to her energy. Tiffany was radiant, her laughter filling the space around her. She talked about her clients, multi-million-dollar tech startups and international fashion brands, with a breathless passion. He talked about his city, the one he saw every day from the conductor's window of a Red Line train, the tapestry of faces in neighborhoods from Ashmont to Alewife. She found his job quaint and noble. "It's so real," she'd said on their third date, holding his hand across the table at a chic South End bistro where a single plate of pasta cost $38. "You're like a part of the city's circulatory system." He'd smiled, thinking she understood. He didn't realize at the time that she saw his job not as a career, but as a charming character trait, an accessory to the man she was dating. They married a year later. The wedding was a battle of budgets. He'd proposed a simple, double-ass, beautiful ceremony at the Arnold Arboretum, followed by a reception at a favorite local restaurant in Jamaica Plain, a plan that would have cost around $10,000. Tiffany, with the support of her parents, had pushed for something grander. The final event was at a waterfront hotel in the Seaport District, a glittering affair that cost over $80,000. Her parents covered most of it, a fact Tiffany never let him forget. "My parents believe in celebrating milestones properly," she'd say, a subtle dig at his more modest means. Their life together settled into a strange rhythm of two separate financial worlds, colliding. Patrick's $74 to $10 salary was the bedrock of their household. It paid the mortgage on the Roslindale house, a home he'd bought with a down payment from his own savings before they were married. It paid the utilities, the car insurance for his 12-year-old Honda Civic, and the groceries from Stop and Shop. Tiffany's salary, which started at $110,000 and had climbed to over $160,000, was for what she called the details. The details included her white BMW 3 Series with its $650 monthly lease payment. The details were the weekly brunch outings with her friends to places like the Contessa in Back Bay, where the bill for 4 people could easily top $500. The details were her wardrobe, a $2,400 Burberry trench coat for the fall, a collection of Louis Vuitton handbags that each cost more than their monthly mortgage, and shoes from designers whose names Patrick couldn't pronounce. He tried, in the beginning, to keep up. He'd dip into his small savings to buy her a birthday gift he knew she'd like the $600 David Yurman bracelet he'd purchased one year, only to see it relegated to the back of her jewelry box in favor of a $5,000 Cartier love bracelet she bought for herself a month later. Their home was a museum of this contrast. In the living room, his sturdy, comfortable $800 sofa from Jordan's Furniture faced a wall adorned with a piece of abstract art she'd bought at a gallery for $7,000. In the kitchen, his reliable $350 Keurig coffee maker sat on the counter next to her gleaming Italian-made $2,800 La Marzocco espresso machine that was used more for display than for coffee. He wore an $89 Timex watch that kept perfect time. She wore a $9,000 Rolex Datejust that she constantly worried about scratching. He packed his lunch for work every day in a reusable container, usually leftovers from the simple, hearty meals he liked to cook. Tiffany's lunches were catered affairs at her office or expensive salads from Sweet Green, costing $20 a day, $1,000 a month spent on midday meals. The normalcy of their domestic life was a carefully constructed play. They would sit on the sofa in the evening, him watching a Red Sox game, her scrolling through Instagram, the glow of her phone illuminating her face. They were in the same room, but they existed in different universes. He was living a life, and she was curating one. He had no idea how deep the disparity truly ran, not just in their finances, but in their values. What he saw as a partnership, she saw as a project. And he was the part of the project that needed the most renovation. The pressure to renovate him had been subtle at first, then escalated into a campaign of quiet, soul-crushing cruelty. The moments of betrayal didn't arrive in a single, dramatic explosion. They accumulated like 1,000 tiny cuts, each one delivered with a smile or a dismissive laugh, leaving him bleeding emotionally while the world saw a happy couple. The first major incident happened at a dinner party they hosted. Tiffany had invited 3 couples from her world. The husbands were a venture capitalist, a surgeon, and a real estate developer. They gathered in the living room, sipping on a $150 bottle of wine Tiffany had insisted they buy for the occasion. The conversation, as it always did in her circle, turned to money and status. The VC was celebrating a successful exit that netted his firm a fortune. The surgeon was lamenting the taxes on his seven-figure income. Then, the developer's wife, a woman named Chloe, draped in a $1,500 silk dress, turned to Patrick. Her eyes scanned his simple button-down shirt and chinos. "Patrick, Tiffany tells us you work for the tea," she said, her tone a mixture of curiosity and condescension. "What's that like? Do you get to drive the train?" The room went quiet. Before Patrick could answer, Tiffany let out a high, tinkling laugh. "Oh, honey, he is the driver," she said, placing a hand on his arm as if he were a charming pet. "Someone has to get the little people to work on time, right?" The others chuckled, a polite but knowing sound. Patrick felt the heat rise in his neck. He saw the pity in their eyes. In that moment, he wasn't Tiffany's husband. He was her blue-collar curiosity. He was the real in her curated life, a dash of working-class authenticity to make her own success seem even brighter. He wanted to say something, to defend the dignity of his work, the importance of a public servant. But he looked at Tiffany's smiling face, her eyes warning him not to make a scene, and he said nothing. The silence was its own kind of humiliation. The outrage accumulated. For their 5th anniversary, Patrick spent weeks searching for the perfect gift. He knew Tiffany loved classic literature. After scouring online sellers and rare bookshops, he found a beautiful, leather-bound first edition of her favorite novel, The Age of Innocence. It cost him $450, a significant expense that he'd saved for by taking on extra shifts. He presented it to her over a dinner he'd cooked himself, a paella filled with fresh seafood. She opened the wrapping paper carefully. She looked at the book, running a finger over the embossed cover. "Oh," she said. It was a flat, empty sound. "That's thoughtful, Patrick." She set it on the table without opening it. "Did you happen to see that Cartier bracelet I put in my saved folder on Instagram? The jeweler on Newberry Street has it in stock. It's only $6,200. I thought you'd like something with more meaning," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Meaning is lovely," she replied, picking at her paella. "But a classic Cartier piece is an investment. This," she gestured at the book, "is just an old book." The book remained on the coffee table for a week before migrating to a bookshelf, where it gathered dust, a monument to his failed attempt to speak a language she no longer understood. The cruelty became more direct. She began to frame her criticisms as helpful suggestions. "You know, my friend's husband just transitioned from marketing into a product manager role at Google," she said one evening while she was getting ready for a gala. She was fastening a diamond necklace, a $12,000 piece her parents had given her. "He doubled his salary. You're so smart, Patrick. You're just not ambitious. Have you ever thought about taking a coding boot camp or getting an MBA? A man with your potential shouldn't be punching a clock for the rest of his life." "I like my job, Tiff," he said, standing in the doorway of their bedroom. "I'm proud of it." She turned from the mirror, her expression one of profound disappointment. "Proud of making $74,000 a year? Patrick, that's what my firm pays our interns. Don't you want more for us?" That was her masterstroke, framing her own desire for more wealth, more status, as a shared goal for us. But he knew it wasn't for them. It was for her. He was an embarrassing line item on the budget of her life, and she was determined to correct it. The breaking point, the moment the foundation of his love and trust finally crumbled to dust, came 6 months before the divorce papers arrived. Patrick's grandmother, his beloved Mama B, passed away at the age of 92. She had been a frugal, wise woman, a retired Boston school teacher who had lived in the same small house in Dorchester for 60 years. Patrick was her only grandchild, and in her will, she left him everything, the house and her life savings. After selling the house and liquidating her modest investments, the total inheritance came to $540,218. It was a life-changing sum of money. For Patrick, it was a sacred trust, the final gift from the woman who had raised him after his mother passed. It represented her lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. For Tiffany, it was a lottery win. Before the funds had even cleared in his account, she had a list. "Okay, so first thing, we sell this house," she announced, swirling a glass of Chardonnay that cost $60 a bottle. "The market in Roslindale is fine, but it's not an investment. We can use the inheritance as a 20% down payment on a condo in Back Bay. I saw a gorgeous 2-bedroom on Commonwealth Avenue. The asking price is only $1.5 million. She didn't ask him. She told him. "Then we need to upgrade your car. That Civic is a death trap. We can get you into a nice Tesla Model 3, and I'll trade in the BMW for the new Audi Q5. It's so much cheaper." Her eyes were gleaming with a feverish light he'd never seen before. She pulled out her iPad and showed him spreadsheets she'd made, charts allocating every last dollar of his grandmother's legacy. There was a budget for a new wardrobe for him, $20,000, a vacation to St. Bart's, $15,000, and a line item for home decor, $50,000. "This is my grandmother's money, Tiffany," he said, his voice tight. "Don't be silly, Patrick," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "It's our money now. We're married. What's yours is mine. This is our chance to finally start living the life we deserve." He looked at her, at this woman who saw his inheritance not as a legacy to be honored, but as a pile of cash to be burned on a lifestyle he didn't even want. He saw, with blinding clarity, that she didn't love him. She loved the idea of him, a project she could mold and upgrade. And now, with this influx of cash, she saw the opportunity for a total overhaul. In that moment, watching her greedily map out the spending of his grandmother's life savings, the love he had for her died. It was replaced by something cold, hard, and calculating. He had to protect himself. He had to protect his grandmother's memory. That was the night he made a decision. He smiled weakly at Tiffany, nodded along with her plans, and the very next day he made a quiet phone call. Not to a realtor, but to a financial advisor who specialized in asset protection. The betrayal was complete. Now all that was left was the fallout. And so, on that gray Thursday afternoon, Patrick sat at his simple oak kitchen table, the divorce petition in his hands. The air was still, the house unnervingly quiet. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping a gentle rhythm against the window panes. It was 4:07 p.m. He read through the document, not with the frantic, panicked eyes Tiffany would have expected, but with the methodical focus of a man reviewing a train schedule. He scanned the legalese, the boilerplate language of a broken union. But then he got to the section titled Prayers for Relief. His eyes stopped. Tiffany, the plaintiff, was demanding 1. Exclusive use and possession of the marital home in Roslindale. 2. An award of fair and reasonable alimony, citing the disparity in their potential earning capacities. 3. An equitable division of all marital assets, including but not limited to bank accounts, investment portfolios, and retirement funds. 4. That Patrick be solely responsible for all marital debts incurred during the marriage. 5. An award of her attorney's fees. He saw the name of her lawyer at the bottom, Marcus Thorne, a notorious divorce attorney known in Boston legal circles as the Shark. He was famous for his scorched earth tactics and his exorbitant billing rate, which Patrick knew was close to $1,000 an hour. This wasn't a simple filing. It was a declaration of war. The initial sting, the visceral gut punch of seeing his wife's name on a document designed to tear his life apart, began to fade. It was replaced by a strange, icy calm, a profound and sudden clarity. He saw the entire game laid out before him. This wasn't a real divorce filing, not yet. It was a strategic maneuver, the most audacious and cruel manipulation she had ever attempted. It was a test. She had seen him hesitate to spend his inheritance. She had seen him fail to immediately list their house and start shopping for condos on Commonwealth Avenue. His lack of enthusiasm for her grand plans had been interpreted not as a difference in values, but as a lack of commitment to her. So, she had deployed the nuclear option. She had filed for divorce, with the most aggressive demands possible, to shock him into submission. She expected him to see the papers and panic. She expected him to fall to his knees, weeping. She expected him to beg her to take him back, to promise her anything she wanted. He could hear her voice in his head. "I'll do anything, Tiff. Just don't leave me. The money, it's all yours. Just tell me what you want." And then, after a few days of watching him grovel and suffer, she would magnanimously agree to reconsider. She would tear up the papers, and in doing so, she would have established total control. The inheritance would be hers to command, and he would be so grateful she hadn't left him that he would never question her again. He looked down at the last page of the packet. It was the acknowledgement of service, a simple form with a line for his signature, confirming he had received the complaint. To her, it was just part of the prop, a piece of the elaborate stagecraft of her test. To the Suffolk Probate and Family Court, it was a legally binding confirmation that the case could proceed. Patrick's face was a mask of stillness. No anger, no fear, no sorrow. His deep brown skin seemed to absorb the dim light of the kitchen. He thought of his grandmother. He thought of her calloused hands from decades of grading papers, her quiet dignity, her unwavering belief in him. He thought of Tiffany laughing at his job in front of her friends. He thought of the $450 first edition book gathering dust on the shelf. He picked up a simple blue Bic pen, the kind that came in a pack of 10 for $3.99. His hand did not shake. With a smooth, deliberate motion, he signed his name on the line. Patrick Franklin. He had just accepted her terms of surrender. She just didn't know she was the one who was surrendering. The test was over. The consequences were about to begin. Have you ever had a moment of sudden clarity where you knew exactly what you had to do? Tell us about that turning point in the comments. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs today. Friday morning at 7 a.m., Patrick called the MBTA dispatch office. "This is Conductor Franklin," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not feeling well. I'll need to take a sick day." He wasn't sick, but he felt a profound sense of purpose that was more restorative than any medicine. Tiffany had already left for a 7:30 a.m. spin class at a boutique Back Bay gym, a class that cost $45 per session. He watched her white BMW pull out of the driveway, then went to his closet. He bypassed his uniforms and his casual clothes and pulled out the one suit he owned, a simple charcoal gray suit from Macy's that had cost him $400. He paired it with a crisp white shirt and a conservative blue tie. Instead of heading to a doctor's office, he took the orange line from Forest Hill Station to Downtown Crossing. He walked 2 blocks to a modest but respectable office building on Franklin Street, a world away from the gleaming glass towers that housed Tiffany's firm. On the 7th floor, a simple plaque on the door read, "Rodriguez and Associates, Family Law." Elena Rodriguez was a sharp, formidable woman in her late 40s. Her office wasn't decorated with expensive art, but with framed law degrees and photos of her 2 smiling children. She had been recommended to him by a senior union representative, a man who had seen his share of messy divorces. "She's not a shark," the rep had told him. "She's a giant squid, smart, strategic, and she'll wrap her tentacles around the facts so tight the other side can't breathe." Her hourly rate was $450, less than half of what Marcus Thorne charged, but Patrick knew he was getting the better value. He sat across the desk from her and laid out the situation. He started with the divorce petition, which she read with a practiced, neutral expression. "Classic Thorne," she murmured, tapping a finger on the list of demands. He always asked for the moon, hoping to settle for the sky. Then Patrick placed a second, thicker folder on her desk. It was bound in simple black cardboard. The label on the front, printed from his own computer, read, "The Patrick Franklin Legacy Trust." "What's this?" Elena asked, her eyebrows raising slightly. "This is my grandmother's inheritance," Patrick said. He explained everything. The 540,718, Tiffany's immediate plans to spend it, his realization that she valued the money far more than she valued him. He told her about the phone call he'd made 6 weeks ago, not to a realtor, but to an estate planner. Working with the planner, he had established an irrevocable trust. The trust was the sole beneficiary of his inheritance. As the trustee, he had control over the funds, but as a beneficiary, he could only draw a small, specified amount for his own living expenses. The trust was structured as his sole and separate property, established with inherited funds that had never been commingled with any marital bank account. It was a fortress, built of dense legal paragraphs and designed to be impregnable to claims from a future creditor or a future ex-spouse. Elena Rodriguez opened the folder. She spent the next 20 minutes reading the trust documents in silence. She read every clause, every subsection. Patrick sat quietly, his hands resting on his knees. He could hear the faint traffic sounds from the street below. Finally, she looked up from the papers. The neutral expression on her face was gone, replaced by a slow, spreading smile of pure professional admiration. It was the smile of a chess master who sees her opponent has just walked into a checkmate they didn't even know was on the board. "Mr. Franklin," she said, her voice rich with satisfaction, "your wife hasn't just made a critical mistake. She has, from a legal standpoint, handed us a loaded gun and pointed it at her own head." She explained the legal mechanics. By filing for divorce, Tiffany had established the date of separation. Any assets acquired by Patrick after that date, or any assets legally shielded before that date, were on much stronger ground to be considered separate property. His inheritance, now safely ensconced in the irrevocable trust, was almost certainly untouchable. "She filed the complaint thinking it was a negotiating tactic," Elena continued, leaning forward. "But the court doesn't care about her intentions. It cares about the documents. She started the clock, and by signing the acknowledgement, you have formally entered the game. She thinks she's holding all the cards, but she doesn't even know what game we're playing." They spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. The first step was to file his signed acknowledgement of service with the court immediately, which Elena's paralegal would do that afternoon. This would prevent Tiffany from trying to withdraw her complaint. The second step was to draft the counter petition. They would agree to the divorce. They would not contest the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, but they would systematically dismantle every one of her demands. They would argue for him to be awarded the house by providing mortgage statements and bank records showing he made every payment from his separate account, funded by his salary. They would reject any claim for alimony, providing Tiffany's pay stubs and tax returns to show she was the higher earner. And regarding the division of assets, they would state plainly that the inheritance was non-marital property, held in a legally protected trust. "We file this Monday morning," Elena said, her eyes gleaming. "Let Mr. Thorne explain to his client how her brilliant power move just cost her everything." Patrick walked out of the office building and into the bright Friday sunshine. For the first time in years, he felt light. He had been living under a crushing weight of expectation and disappointment. Now, the weight was gone. He had a plan. He had an advocate. He had the truth, notarized and bound in a cardboard folder. The weekend was an exercise in supreme self-control. It was the longest 48 hours of Patrick's life, a performance of normalcy that required every ounce of his discipline. He was an actor in a play, and only he and his lawyer knew the final act. Tiffany returned from her spin class on Friday morning, flushed and energized. She found Patrick in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. "You're home?" she said, a note of surprise in her voice. "I thought you had a shift." "Called in sick," he said, not turning to look at her. "Just a bit under the weather." "Oh, okay." She stood there for a moment, waiting. She was waiting for the confrontation, for the crumpled divorce papers to be thrown at her feet. She was waiting for the tears, the anger, the pleading. When it didn't come, a flicker of confusion crossed her face. She poured herself a glass of filtered water from the $200 Brita dispenser she'd bought and went upstairs to shower. The entire weekend followed this script. Patrick was a ghost of his former self, present in body but absent in spirit. He was polite, quiet, and maddeningly calm. He mowed the lawn on Saturday morning. He watched the Bruins game on Saturday night, nursing a single Sam Adams beer that cost $12 for a six-pack. He did the laundry on Sunday, the scent of fresh detergent filling the small house. For Tiffany, his calm was more unnerving than any outburst would have been. She had rehearsed her lines for a drama, and he was refusing to take the stage. She kept probing, trying to get the reaction she needed. "Is everything all right, Patrick?" she asked on Saturday afternoon. She was sitting on the expensive sofa, scrolling through a catalog for a high-end furniture store. "You seem quiet." "Just tired," he replied from the kitchen, where he was methodically chopping vegetables for a stew. "We haven't really talked since, well, for a few days," she tried again. "Nothing to talk about," he said, his voice even. The rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board was the only other sound. Each chop felt like a countdown. Inside, he was a churning vortex of emotions. Every time he looked at her, he saw the architect of his humiliation. He saw the woman who laughed at his job, belittled his gifts, and plotted to seize his grandmother's legacy. He remembered her words, "Don't you want more for us?" And the rage was a physical thing, a hot coal in his stomach. But on the outside, he was a placid lake. His face was a carefully constructed mask of indifference. This was the hardest part of the plan Elena had laid out. Do nothing. Say nothing. Let her test become a crucible of her own making. Let her simmer in the anxiety of his silence. By Sunday evening, Tiffany was visibly agitated. Her breezy confidence had evaporated, replaced by a brittle tension. She had expected him to break by now. She had expected to be in the powerful position of forgiving him and taking him back. His refusal to engage had robbed her of her power. She found him in the small, spare bedroom he used as an office. He was sitting at his simple desk, paying bills online. "Patrick, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp. She closed the door behind her. He swiveled in his chair to face her. "Okay," he said. "What is going on with you? You've been acting strange all weekend. Did you get the delivery on Thursday?" This was it. The moment he was supposed to crack, he looked at her. His expression unreadable. His heart was pounding, but his voice came out cool and steady. "Yes," he said, "I got it." "And?" she demanded, her hands on her hips. "You have nothing to say? After you got that?" He held her gaze. He thought of Elena's advice. Let her be the one to admit what she did. "What do you want me to say, Tiffany?" he asked, his tone genuinely curious. She sputtered for a moment. She couldn't very well say, "I want you to beg for my forgiveness for not spending your inheritance fast enough, so I can cancel the fake divorce I filed to terrorize you." I thought you'd be upset," she finally burst out, her voice cracking with frustration. "I was surprised," he said, which was the honest truth. He let a beat of silence hang in the air. "It's a big step to take." "Well, maybe it's a step that needed to be taken," she shot back, falling back on her script. "Maybe I'm tired of feeling like we're not on the same page, like you're not invested in our future." He just nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. Her face crumpled in confusion. This was all wrong. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't defending himself. He was just accepting it. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. She had built a cage for him, but he was just sitting calmly inside it, looking out at her. It was she who was trapped, rattling the bars, desperate for the response that would validate her entire scheme. "I'm going to bed," she finally said, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She walked out, leaving him alone in the quiet office. Patrick took a deep breath, the first full one he'd taken all weekend. The performance was almost over. Tomorrow the curtain would rise on the final act. Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. The sun was brilliant, streaming through the kitchen windows and glinting off the stainless steel of Tiffany's unused La Marzocco espresso machine. The dreary rain of Thursday felt like a memory from another lifetime. Patrick was already dressed. He stood in the center of the kitchen, a man transformed. Gone was the rumpled uniform of the conductor. Gone was the weekend ghost in a t-shirt and jeans. He wore the same $400 charcoal suit from his meeting with Elena, his shoes polished to a high shine. His neatly lined-up fade was fresh from a Saturday morning trip to his barber in Dorchester, a $30 expense that felt like a strategic investment. In his hand, he held a stiff, leather-bound portfolio that cost $50 at Staples. He looked calm, solid, and immovable. Tiffany drifted into the kitchen, wrapped in a $300 silk robe, her hair piled messily on her head. She was holding her phone, already scrolling. She stopped short when she saw him. "Wow," she said, a sarcastic edge to her voice. "You're all dressed up. Big day driving the train?" "Something like that," Patrick said, his voice perfectly even. He waited for her to pour her coffee. She bypassed the espresso machine as usual and took a bottle of cold brew from the refrigerator. She poured it into a glass, her movements jerky and uncertain. She was still reeling from the failure of her weekend-long campaign to break him. Patrick walked to the kitchen island, the polished granite surface that she had insisted on, a $6,000 upgrade during a minor kitchen renovation. He placed the leather portfolio on the counter. With a deliberate click, he opened it. He took out 2 documents. The first, he slid across the granite toward her. It was a copy of the Acknowledgement of Service, the form from the divorce packet he had signed on Thursday. His signature was clear and strong at the bottom. A court stamp in the top corner, dated Friday, October 13th, showed it had been officially filed. "What is this?" Tiffany asked, her voice a little shaky. She looked from the paper to his face. "That's my acknowledgement that I received your complaint for divorce," Patrick stated. "It was filed with the court on Friday." He then slid the second document across the island. It was thicker, stapled in the corner. The title on the front page was Defendant's Answer and Counter Petition for Divorce. Her eyes scanned the title, and a deep frown creased her forehead. "Counter petition? What are you talking about?" "I'm accepting your petition for divorce, Tiffany," Patrick said. His voice wasn't loud or angry. It was the voice he used to announce the next station stop over the train's intercom. Clear, calm, and final. "This is my response. Since you initiated the proceedings, I thought it was only fair to respond promptly." The color drained from Tiffany's face. The mask of bored superiority she wore like a second skin dissolved, revealing the raw panic underneath. Her hand, holding the glass of cold brew, began to tremble. "But, Patrick, no," she stammered, her eyes wide with dawning horror. It was a test. I wasn't serious." He looked at her. For the first time, he let the full, cold weight of his decision show in his eyes. There was no hatred there, no vengeful glee. There was something far more devastating, absolute finality. "It's It's a legally binding document, Tiffany, he said, his words precise and devastating. You hired a lawyer. You signed your name. You had it served. The court seems to think you were serious, and now so do I. He gestured to the counter petition. My lawyer, Elena Rodriguez, filed this at the Suffolk courthouse first thing this morning. It's done. Your lawyer? She whispered, the words catching in her throat. The name Marcus Thorne flashed in her mind. His $950 per hour fee, his advice to hit him hard and fast to show him you're in control. She had followed his advice. She had paid a $10,000 retainer on her personal credit card to get him to file the papers. The test is over, Patrick said quietly. She finally looked down at the counter petition, her trembling fingers tracing the words. She saw the clauses, one after another. Dismantling her world, the rejection of alimony, the claim to the house, the assertion that his inheritance was separate, non-marital property. The glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't shatter. It was a thick, expensive tumbler that cost $30. It hit the hardwood floor with a dull, heavy thud, splashing dark brown coffee across the gleaming wood and the hem of her silk robe. She stared at the puddle, then back at Patrick's calm, resolute face. You can't do this, she pleaded, her voice breaking. The arrogant, powerful PR executive was gone. In her place was a terrified woman who had just lit a match and thrown it into a room she hadn't realized was filled with gasoline. Patrick picked up his leather portfolio from the island. He turned, his back straight, his shoulders squared. I didn't do this, Tiffany, he said without turning around. You did. He walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He walked out the front door and into the bright Monday morning, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her own creation, staring at the papers that had just turned her life into a legally binding disaster. The consequences cascaded, not with the dramatic flair Tiffany would have orchestrated, but with the cold, relentless efficiency of the legal system she had so foolishly invoked. Each downfall was a direct and measurable result of her own actions, enumerated in court filings and financial statements. First, there was the trust. Marcus Thorne, her expensive shark of a lawyer, was apoplectic. After a week of research and consultations with financial experts, he had to deliver the news. The Patrick Franklin Legacy Trust was, in his words, an ironclad fortress, because Patrick had established it with inherited funds that were never commingled, and before she had filed for divorce, it was unequivocally his separate property. The $547,718 was untouchable. Tiffany's dreams of a $1.5 million Back Bay condo, a new Audi, and a $20,000 wardrobe evaporated in an instant. Her primary leverage was gone before the fight had even begun. Second, the house. Elena Rodriguez presented a mountain of evidence. The deed showing Patrick bought the house 2 years before the marriage. The bank statements showing the down payment came from his personal savings. 12 years of mortgage statements, every single $2,800 payment auto-debited from his personal checking account into which only his MBTA salary was ever deposited. Tiffany had contributed nothing to the mortgage or upkeep. Her lawyer argued that the appreciation in value during the marriage should be a marital asset. The judge was not impressed. Citing Tiffany's initiation of the divorce and her significantly higher income, the judge awarded the house and all its equity to Patrick. Tiffany was given a court order to vacate the premises within 30 days. Third, spousal support. This was the quickest and most humiliating defeat. Thorne's demand for alimony was met with a simple filing from Elena. Tiffany's last 3 years of tax returns, showing an average annual income of $155,000, compared to Patrick's steady $74,210. The judge took less than 5 minutes to dismiss the claim for alimony entirely, noting that Tiffany was not only self-sufficient, but was the high-income earner in the marriage. She was awarded nothing. Fourth, the credit cards. The day after filing his counter petition, Patrick had logged into his American Express account. He was the primary cardholder on an Amex Platinum card, for which he paid the $695 annual fee. Tiffany was a supplementary cardholder, using it for her brunches, her shopping, her Ubers. Her spending on that card alone often topped $4,000 a month. With 3 clicks, Patrick removed her as an authorized user. The next time she tried to buy a $90 face cream at a Sephora in the Prudential Center, the card was declined. Her access to a rolling $50,000 line of credit vanished overnight. She was forced to rely on her own credit, which was strained by her high spending and the $10,000 retainer she had already paid Thorne. Fifth, her social standing. The story, as stories do in her gossipy, competitive circle, got out. But it wasn't the version she would have wanted. It wasn't the story of a powerful woman leaving her underachieving husband. It was the story of a fool who filed a fake divorce to manipulate her husband, only to have him calmly accept it and walk away with his $500,000 inheritance. She became a joke, a cautionary tale whispered over $25 cocktails. Her friend Chloe, the one who had condescendingly asked about his job, was the first to distance herself. The invitations to galas and weekend trips to Nantucket stopped coming. Her carefully curated social life crumbled. Finally, there were the legal fees. Marcus Thorne did not work for free. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, his bills mounted. $950 an hour for every phone call, every email, every filing. With no hope of getting Patrick to pay her fees, the cost was entirely her own. Within 3 months, her legal bills had surpassed $50,000, eating away at her personal savings and forcing her to sell her Rolex Datejust, the one she worried about scratching, just to keep her lawyer on the case. The test had become the single most expensive mistake of her life. 1 year later, the crisp air of a Boston autumn felt different. It felt clean. Patrick stood in a small, sun-drenched park in Roslindale, a few blocks from his house. A group of 5 young, new MBTA conductor trainees, diverse and eager, gathered around him. He was a mentor now, a position offered to him due to his impeccable record and his calm demeanor. He was explaining the intricacies of the signal system near Park Street Station, his voice patient and clear. His deep brown skin, which had seemed drawn and tired a year ago, was now luminous in the afternoon light. He was respected here. His work had meaning. He kept the house. The silence that had once felt so heavy was now a comfortable peace. The La Marzocco machine was gone, sold on Facebook Marketplace for $1,200. In its place on the counter sat a framed photo of his grandmother. The small backyard, which Tiffany had always ignored, was now a flourishing garden. He'd built 2 raised beds and filled them with tomatoes, kale, and peppers. Tending to it became his therapy, a way of nurturing life. The trust remained untouched, a silent guardian of his future. The interest it generated, a modest but steady $2,000 a month, wasn't for luxury. It was a safety net. He used a portion of it to create a small scholarship fund at his old high school in Dorchester, a quiet tribute to Mama B, the retired teacher. His life was simpler now, and infinitely richer. He was dating a woman named Maria, a second-grade teacher he'd met at the Roslindale branch of the Boston Public Library. Their dates weren't at expensive restaurants in the South End. They were long walks along the Charles River Esplanade, their hands intertwined. They spent Sundays cooking together in his warm kitchen, the air filled with the scent of garlic and basil and easy laughter. Her presence was a balm, a gentle warmth that soothed the old scars. He saw Tiffany one last time, by chance, at a Starbucks on a rainy Tuesday. He was in line for a simple black coffee, a $3.25 expense. She was sitting alone at a small table, staring into a laptop. The expensive clothes were still there. But they looked tired, the confidence they were meant to project now absent. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked up, and their eyes met. A flicker of the old panic crossed her face, then it settled into a kind of weary resignation. She gathered her things and approached him. "Patrick," she said, her voice quiet, "can I talk to you for a second?" He nodded and stepped out of line. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her gaze fixed on the floor. "For everything. I was a fool. I was greedy and cruel, and I didn't see what I had until it was gone." He listened, his expression calm. He heard the words, and he believed she meant them, at least in this moment. He thought of the rage and humiliation he had felt, the cold determination that had carried him through that terrible weekend. And he realized, with a sense of surprise, that it was all gone. All he felt now was a kind of distant pity. "I appreciate you saying that, Tiffany," he said, and he meant it. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He had forgiven her, not for her, so she could sleep better at night. He had forgiven her for himself, so he could be free. He didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. It had served its purpose. It had fueled the engine of his escape, and now the journey was over. He wished her well, turned, and walked back to the counter to get his coffee. He walked out of the Starbucks and into the rain, pulling up the collar of his simple jacket. He felt the warmth of the coffee cup in his hands and the cool, clean rain on his face. He was at peace. True wealth, he now understood, isn't measured by the price tags on your clothes or the address of your condo. It's not found in the approval of a fickle social circle or the accumulation of expensive things. True wealth is dignity, it's purpose. It's the quiet joy of a garden you planted with your own hands, the respect of your peers, and the comforting warmth of a hand that holds yours not for what you have, but for who you are. It's the profound, unshakable peace of living an authentic life, a life built not on facades, but on the solid ground of your own character. Thank you for joining us for this story on Love Beyond Pride. If Patrick's journey resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share powerful stories of strength and resilience. What did you think of the way Patrick handled the situation? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one,